happy to be here to talk to all of you about cloud security and specifically the rise of Terraform and cloud security. I've been in the industry for about 15 years in total, and I've been doing cloud security for about 7 years in general, starting with AWS, moving into GCP and Azure as well. You can see just a little bit of background just in front of you. I'm a lead cloud security engineer at Cisco. I'm a cloud security consultant. I'm an adjunct professor. And of course, I'm an aspiring SANS instructor. And I'm extremely excited and privileged to be here with all of you today. A little bit more about me, just a quick introduction to the SANS community. I've been a cloud security engineer at Cisco for the past several years, 15 years of total experience. I've held a plethora of industry certifications, whether it's HashiCorp, AWS, GCP, DoD, NSA, Cisco certifications, of course, and other certifications like CompTIA and others. I received my graduate certificate from Michigan State University in cybersecurity and cybercriminology, got my master's from Eastern Michigan University, and I'm an adjunct professor of cloud security and cloud technologies at Eastern Michigan. I reside in Michigan, which, you may or may not see the big E behind me and other Michigan State stuff in my office. So why are we here, right? From my past experience being at Cisco the last 3 or 4 years in this specific role, I was one of the first cloud security kind of professionals within the team, kind of a day-to-day engineer, I guess you could say. And Terraform was a big tool, right? So it was used all over the place. It was used in different capacities, and our team was tasked to figure out the best way to implement it within the organization, within our business unit, within Cisco. As you can see, there's a little kind of almost like a theme to this, is that complexity is the enemy of security. So Stefan was a chat on my Twitch channel, if you're familiar with that. And he's a professional himself, and he's a developer, right? So, I really took that to heart. Complexity is the enemy of security. So my job is to make things simple, transparent, trustworthy within the organization. And that's really what you're going to learn today. So you're going to kind of understand at a very high level how Terraform and Terraform Cloud can make you successful in the cloud with Terraform and bake that security in first, build that trust between cloud security professionals and developers, and learn how to build Terraform for the future in your organization, which is not easy to do. It does take patience, it takes time, and I'm going to try to give you just a little bit of a taste of that today. So we'll just start right at the basic, just to make sure we're all on the same level. What is infrastructure as code, right? So there's plenty of different versions. There's Ansible, Puppet, Chef, Python, even Jenkins, OpenStack. There's so many different types of infrastructure as code, but really infrastructure as code is really allows you to put a configuration in rather than a graphical user interface. It allows you to manage, change, build your infrastructure in a safe, consistent, and repeatable way by defining resources, configurations that you can version, reuse, and share. Terraform can run anywhere. That's the beauty of Terraform. It doesn't matter whether you're using Java, AWS, GCP, Azure. It doesn't matter. You can run it anywhere, and it's easy for you to understand and write, whether you're a developer, cloud security professional like myself, or anyone else in between. It really, truly doesn't matter. And I took it up in 6 months, and I've really helped the organization change the way that cloud security is used and interacts with developers and executives and really anyone who needs to talk about the cloud. Terraform State allows you to track resources changes throughout your development. I think that's really important to understand, simply because without managing the resources, what's the purpose of Terraform? So when you manage resources in Terraform, it essentially determines if something is built, deployed, and managed through that environment. So what that means is if you have a S3 bucket, for example, Terraform will manage that for you, how it's set up, whether it's public or private, if the ACL is enabled or not, and so forth. You can commit your configurations to version control, safely collaborate on infrastructure, just like Git, like GitLab, GitHub, Bitbucket, whatever your tool of choice. If you use Git, you can use Terraform. So what is Terraform, right? I kind of explained that a little bit, but this goes just a little bit more in depth with kind of a diagram. You write the code, you plan, and you apply it. Simple as that. You build a configuration, you plan it to validate that it's good, and you deploy it to the infrastructure of choice. This can be cloud, on-premise, human readable, versions, reuse, and share, as I explained earlier. But the reason I want to kind of push this into your brains a little bit is because this quickly built the best security that we could find. And when I mean find, I mean build. In most cases, we had to kind of fight for what we wanted, right? So the status quo is to simply build something and forget it, or lift and shift, right? Because cloud is there for you. Cloud is going to secure you. That's not the case, right? So there's that shared responsibility model between the two. You have the customer responsible and you have the provider responsible. In this case, you are responsible for the entire process. For example, if you have TypeScript or Python, you can use a CDK from HashiCorp to build in Terraform with those applications to use in Terraform and to manage in Terraform Cloud. And again, it goes back to, and again, I want to reiterate that again, it reiterates that Terraform state file, which keeps everything in compliance, inventoried, and it puts the cloud security first and the oversight for the organization. Again, my motto is if there's no log, it didn't happen, right? It doesn't matter whether you're an entry-level developer or the CISO or even the CEO of a major corporation. We will find you and we will log you, because that is the way that security is built, especially cloud security, because we all know that clouds run really quickly and really fast out of control. And Terraform Cloud can help you with that. And that is my personal infrastructure as code tool choice. A little bit more from the SaaS product of Terraform Cloud. Because again, we're talking about Terraform, which is the language, and Terraform Cloud, which is the product. Now you might be thinking, well, I can just use Terraform locally, right? And push it up to the cloud and deploy my things. But then at that point, you have no centralization. You have no validation of what exactly is going on. In our perspective, we have full gambit of what's happening, who's doing it, why they're doing it, and we have a kind of a stage gate to do that. Terraform Cloud is essentially that SaaS product from HashiCorp. It allows that centrally Terraform managed state file, centralized security and governance, enables Sentinel policies for organizational use, which Sentinel policies are a way to validate and ensure that things are being deployed properly the first time. For example, an S3 bucket, if you want it to be built a certain way to maybe use a KMS key, for example, that you created internally, and you don't want your developers to be able to deploy something that does not find that specific use case or adhere to that specific policy, you can define that in a Sentinel policy. That will allow you to get to that security first mindset. VCS providers is GitHub or GitLab, which secures and audits all code-based changes. So what that means is exactly what it means, right? If a log, if there's a log, it happened. If there's not, it didn't. It enables, RBAC-based permissions to ensure teams have the ability and to create oversight and proper authentication and authorization to various environments, which may include dev, non-prod, and production environments. So really what that means is that that enables your IAM team to enable themselves to build Terraform with roles, with users, with authentication, with SSO, with all of that in mind in code with Terraform and Terraform Cloud. That's important because if you're a developer, right, there is no reason that you should have access to production. Many of you may disagree with that, but there is no reason, in my opinion, to have access to a production environment if you are a developer. You should have figured out all of those problems in dev and non-prod. And Terraform Cloud and Terraform makes you adhere to those kind of stage gates, which we'll talk about later, before you even get to that process. So we know to the best of our ability, right, as code and technology changes, there are going to be some ups and downs. And we'll talk about that later too. But for the most part, you can be confident that your Terraform Cloud is proper, standardized, secure, and of course, scalable. This process is extremely important because it promotes through the process, which lessens the ability for leak code bases or leaks in data. It allows for the easy rollback via VCS process to ensure if any issues arise with the development lifecycle. Again, that's kind of the process of auditing, management, oversight, right? We want to make sure that from the start, there's that trust and transparency within the organization. Why? Why Terraform? Why Terraform Cloud, right? That's just the question. It's the new tool of the trade, right? It's a publicly traded company. It's just like all the rest. You know, for a lot of it, it is. But I think the biggest change that Terraform has given me is that it's given me the ability to think like a developer. My background is not developer at all. I was a sysadmin. I've worked in network operations. I've been in global incident response. I'm not really developer mindset, but now I am. And we've proven that time and time again with me being one of the first security hires within the BU and building out an entire team around a common idea with developers, our champions, which we'll talk about later as well, and the internal security team with our CISO and our directors. We want to make sure that we are successful no matter the cost. And Terraform Cloud has enabled us to do that. So cloud security professionals, right? We're not. Cloud security is unique. In my opinion, it's probably one of the most difficult professions in software development. The only reason I say that is because we deal with everything. We don't deal with the feature. We deal with the entire process. Deploying, managing, updating, validating, securing, responding, detecting, you name it, we're there. We must deliver value. I've worked at a couple of places in the past where I was told to bill to a specific use case. They would say, Ryan, you're not making us money. You need to bill to a certain project or something. And I've left those places. Now I'm in a place where I can truly prosper and be myself, because I know that my job is not to make the company money. It is to protect the company, right? No matter where I'm at. And how do we deliver value? Well, we can do it as code now. We can show that process just like a developer does. A developer says, hey, we released this new feature for this project or this product. I can say, you know what? I've updated the module to validate that we're using the latest and greatest AWS, GCP, and Azure standards, because Terraform supports those inputs. Let's say it supports data at rest, and that's now enabled because of our team. And the biggest thing is to keep the organization out of the front page, right? Don't make things personal. That's what's made us so successful. We truly just want to keep out of the front page news. We want to continue improving security without impacting application development teams. And I've been at this role for over 3 years now, and we have never impacted the application with what we do. You might be thinking, well, that's probably incorrect. Not with Terraform. With Terraform, we've been able to properly manage the deployment lifecycle. And that's important because, you know, time is money, right? If we cause an issue, they're going to kind of, well, cloud security isn't that important. Now we're showing that value time and time and time and time again. And it's working. It's probably the reason that I'm kind of here, which I'm really, again, privileged to be here, because it's been an exciting ride and it's only just begun. So my question is, and all of you can kind of think about it, why isn't cloud security engineering taking ownership of the security thing, code, process, or procedure, right? Why aren't we taking ownership of it? The way that I see it is cloud security engineering is really in of itself. We're part of the process. We don't really own resources in AWS, right? We don't own how a developer is going to deploy X, Y, Z. We just build the standards around it. So then if you build something like, let's say, a load balancer in AWS, we require that you have a WAF enabled on it with the proper WAF rules. Terraform and Terraform Cloud has enabled us to do that, to deliver value, to improve things continually without impacting anything. That's what I'm saying. That's the power of being transparent and truthful and validating that developers are an expert in what they do. I am not a developer. I will never be as good as what they know. So I leverage that in this process. And we'll talk about that more later as well. So the next question that I want to ask everyone is, cloud security professionals need to catch up to development patterns, right? I've heard that a lot, where a developer comes to me and they say something I have no idea what it means. I'll be honest, there's been a lot of times that I have no idea what they're talking about. And that's okay. That is okay, because that's not my job to know how their application works. My job is to make sure that they have an enabled way to build that cloud security on top of it. So let's say we have an application that out of the box, we want to make sure cloud security requirements and deployment patterns, right? How do we do that? We build modules for whatever they need to deploy. So we build a module that says, okay, S3 buckets have to be deployed a certain way, or load balancer, or EC2 instance, or EKS, or something like that within Terraform. And then we say, hey, here's how you need to call it within your code. So here's a module, here's X, Y, and Z, here's how you deploy it. That's really what cloud security is all about. You are kind of a developer. I hate to say it, but I kind of am a developer, because I want to make sure that it's easy for them to pull in the stuff that they need. And then when they deploy it to dev, non-prod, and production, they have checkboxes. They have stage gates that validate what we've been saying is true. So for example, a stage gate is essentially a check, or a checkbox, I guess you could say, of checking vulnerabilities using TFSec, Trufflehog, and many other internal and open source tools to maintain and secure the code the first time, right? The key phrase there is the first time. We don't want to get that code out when it's in a bad state. When it's, well, it's the MVP, we'll push it out as we can. That's not good enough anymore, because as soon as that happens, you're on the front page news, right? So that's what I'm saying. The cloud security professionals need to catch up. And Terraform and Terraform Cloud has enabled us to do that, especially me and our team. It's been a tremendous journey, and one that I've taken with a lot of my other engineers and with our IAM team. When I started over 3 years ago, it was a different situation. Now we have an entire team validating Terraform code to ensure that our IAM process is low, and our admins, right, our quote admins, are nowhere to be found. I'm an admin, some others are admins, but only security and only if you need it, which in most cases, in 99.9% of all cases, you do not need to log into an AWS or a GCP or an Azure console. That's really, really a key point from this page. So we can't talk about Terraform without just kind of a couple of buzzwords. The reason I say buzzwords is because DevOps and DevSecops. I'm sure all of you have heard it, or you wouldn't be here. I think they're one and the same. They kind of go hand in hand. I'm not going to read all of these things on this slide, but I'm going to kind of graze through it. I'm really a visual learner, but I like to enable these to build various questions that you might have. So what does DevOps and DevSecops mean to you? Think about that for a second. In my opinion, that's not the right question to ask. All businesses and structures are different. So what that means is essentially, if you're a small startup, you may only be worried about DevOps. You might not have time for the security part of it, right? Or let's say you're a huge organization, a Fortune 500 company that has all the ability to build a DevSecOps to embed developer-focused operations, right, DevOps, into a cloud security mindset first is really what I like to think of DevSecOps as, because it effectively makes sure that you make it smooth, you integrate the first time, and you manage the changes throughout the organization. DevSecOps really means that you embed the security on top of the application or developer code that you have from the start, right? So you have infrastructure as code, you have a CI/CD pipeline like Circle CI or GitHub Actions or whatever tool that you choose. And then you embed those things on top of it from the start. So really, it's really to make you think a little bit and take a step back and say, okay, should I even be worried about DevOps or DevSecOps? No. You really should be asking your question, where is your organization? You really need to just think that I need cloud security. I need to make sure that cloud security is embedded into my process, into my Git code. And Terraform can help you do that. DevOps, again, means collaboration between application streams through the app development and processes to deploy the application to the customer in most cases, in my opinion. That's how I define it, because it makes me simplify it a little bit more, right? Because it's complicated. These things are complicated, right? Everyone might have a different definition of what these actually are. But for me, it's really, I'm not even going to really think about these things. I'm going to think about how can cloud security be baked into the application process. That's as simple as it should be, right? Continuous delivery, continuous integration. That's all you need. Make sure that you're building infrastructure as code on top of it, and then that will manage your development, your DevOps, and your DevSecOps pipeline. Because again, I see these as buzzwords. I don't see them as standards or processes to follow. I see cloud security as the standard that should be embedded in from the start, not these kind of loosely coupled terms. I will focus a little bit more on the DevOps side though, because obviously that's much, much more relevant to what we're talking about. So on the left there, again, a great blog post that I saw, I think, and I gave credit there, the difference between DevOps and DevSecOps. So you can see on the right there, security is embedded in all of those different processes: development, IT operations, and application delivery. That's cloud security, right? Let's get rid of the DevSecOps word and let's just use cloud security, because that will make things so much easier to understand and to give to your leadership, right? Instead of DevSecOps, they're going to think, well, we need to hire more developers. We need to get more application centric. No, you want cloud security professionals to understand the cloud problem with security, right? Because, I would bet that the cloud is more secure than on-premise. Some of you might disagree. Some of you might agree. But if you build it the right way the first time, it's going to be more secure, right? It's going to be. Is everything foolproof? No. But I think we can make it very difficult for malicious hackers and malicious folks to get data and make it useless. And that's what a cloud security platform would do, like Terraform and Terraform Cloud. It allows cloud security to be on top of it. So as I mentioned before, if there's a WAF deployment in AWS, the cloud security team can deploy the WAF rules that are required to be used. This is something that I've had a hands-on experience doing. It's extremely powerful, the collaboration that we've had with the developers. We've been able to build them a process to embed within their code very easily. Oh, you have a new AWS account? Let's go ahead and enable the WAF deployments that they own, right? They own the resources that are deployed, but security still requires them to have specific AWS WAF rules. I'm sure a lot of you have come into grips where you are struggling with trying to get WAF rules out. They're difficult, they're hard, they're still hard, but Terraform has made it very easy to at least implement progress and change. Whereas before it would take a full-time FTE person who's literally their entire job is to build WAF rules. That's no good. We want an entire team like our team, or in general, a cloud security team, to build WAF rules with modules, with Terraform and Terraform Cloud, and be able to say, yep, the cloud security team has deployed, managed, and scaled out our WAF rules. So now any AWS account that comes on board, which we all know that most customers and most people of AWS will not just have one AWS account. So we know that this applies really anywhere. You can just say, oh, yep, here you go, deploy it to this account. It makes it very easy, very scalable, and it validates the cloud security team and the term and the process all in one. So it really makes the value that I have and my team have, and it provides that value that cloud and security in general has been lacking for a long time. And again, I've had jobs where, I've managed various tools and I've rolled out various agents, and I've done a lot of that, and I've enjoyed it, still love it today. And I do that on the consulting side from time to time. But really the bread and butter is getting in the code and making that overall change, that mindset that security can be easy. Well, easy relative term, right? But it can be easy because the Terraform code is really easy to understand. It's easy to implement. And that's what I'm trying to kind of push into everyone's thought mind, or everyone's mindset. It's important. And make sure that collaboration exists, right? Don't be the person who's on the call that tries to make everything happen. It's incremental, the entire process. I remember when I first started in this role, I was going to fix everything the week that I started. I was wrong. What I should be doing, and what everyone on this call and everyone out there who's watching this, is you want to make incremental change. And that's what Terraform can do, Terraform Cloud, and this entire mindset of cloud security, and getting rid of the DevOps and DevSecops. In my opinion, it's hard to bring that value to leadership if you're processing it in that way. Think of it as cloud security and security in general can bring value. And again, this makes sure as much as possible, the code is securely checked and processes per commit and merge history with GitHub, for example, right? So what that means in layman's terms is essentially when something is checked and validated, it will go through the normal Git process. Now, probably one of the most important slides that I'm going to talk about, stage gates. It really depends on where you go and what industry you're in. But in my opinion, stage gates is really a term that's generic. But from our purpose, it's a stage gate is something within a DevSecOps pipeline to enable Terraform Cloud and Terraform code. This requires everyone to build standards that is geared towards their expertise, right? So again, for example, like I was saying earlier, just at a high level, and this is kind of to go a little bit more into that. The reason that we were so successful in this process is that we geared folks to their expertise, right? So we have developer teams that are building the actual resources for Terraform, but then we have the security modules that need to be owned by cloud security professionals, like WAF rules, right? So this allows us to say, okay, developer, you've deployed this WAF, this CloudFront, right, for example, or this WAF deployment, right? And then when you do that, we're going to require you to have these WAF rules enabled regardless of the environment. That kind of takes the DevSecOps, puts it in a bubble, and builds cloud security on top of that. So when you're talking with leadership, you can say DevSecOps, cloud security. And you can slowly get people to think of cloud security as not DevSecOps, not DevOps, just its own thing. Because cloud security engineering is a thing. It is something that is coming fast with no ends in sight. There's every single day we are getting more and more requests in more and more difficult situations that we are equipped to deal with because of Terraform and the way that we are building our processes and managing things. Because I will tell you, if we didn't have Terraform, we would be up at night. I would never sleep. But now I can sleep good because I know if something is deployed, it's using a version, right? A deployed reusable version of Terraform and the Terraform module, which again, module is just reusable code that has various inputs for like an S3 bucket or whatever resource you want in AWS. And it enables that version to say, okay, this moment in time, this is secure. This is a good piece of secure code because of these stage gates, right? So you have SAS scanning, TFSec, DAST, and other internal tools to validate various design patterns. So you're using a couple static analysis tools, a couple open source. Maybe you have an enterprise solution or something where you're integrating all of these things. So when the code is deployed at that moment in time, so when you have a specific version of a module, you can deploy it as is, and you can essentially enable that entire team to use that code and be good about it, whether it's deployed to dev, non-prod, production, right? But let's say something happens. Let's say you need to make a quick change, right? And AWS has released another input that has to be enabled on that service. What's going to happen is Terraform is going to say, hey, AWS, we're going to work with you. Okay, here's that new input. Let's just say it's enable or something. It says that you have to enable this and you have to enable this input. Now what's going to happen is that they're going to make a change on their provider in Terraform Cloud in their provider's registry. You're going to go ahead and update your version to that newest, latest version with AWS and HashiCorp and their registry, which holds all of their modules for all of their providers, whether it's AWS, GCP, or Azure, or many other providers. And then now what you're going to be able to do is easily update your version, include that input, and say, hey, developers, we have a new required version that needs to be enabled. You need to enable this before we'll let you to promote any more code. So if you have another deployment on, let's say, another release schedule or something, you can say, okay, you have to update this module and your code to this newest and latest and greatest. And the stage gates are going to require them to do that. That's the power of cloud security. That's the power of just mentioning what DevSecOps is, turning it into that kind of cloud security mindset. Because again, we don't want to go away from DevSecOps, but what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're portraying it as cloud security in a way. That's been very successful. We've been able to really get a lot of important things changed because with what I just mentioned, now we're just developers, right? It's a feature. Everything we do is a feature, which is awesome. It's a new standard, a new input, a new deployment. But we know that the code was deployed in a good and proper and secure way. That is what we can feel good about. That is the value of cloud security. So again, building a successful cloud security strategy with Terraform and Terraform Cloud. I am a big proponent of memes, as you can tell. And this girl is like, it worked on my local machine. I've heard that countless and countless times. Now, in today's world, that doesn't mean anything, right? You can validate all you want locally. You can put whatever type of code, whatever type of local checks you want. When you push it to your CI to CD pipeline, whether it's Circle CI, GitHub Actions, or whatever it may be, it still has to go through my checks, right? It still has to go through securities checks, has to go through QA. It has to go through an entire gambit of checks to make sure that the security strategy is good, that it works, that it scales, right? And that is so powerful. That's why everything that I do is not on my local machine. My local machine could blow up right now and it doesn't matter to me because I have everything stored in a cloud environment. And that's kind of the same thinking here, right? Everything is in the cloud. Everything is managed in the cloud, audited in the cloud, validated with these great strategies. Because that's the only way that you can build in buy-in. for these types of tools, because we all want the latest and greatest tool. We all want the most shiny thing. But at the end of the day, can you collaborate with people? Can you talk to people? So again, just to reiterate these main points, if you want to be successful, you want to use Terraform Cloud, you want to use some type of infrastructure as code, and you want to build that buy-in from champions. Now, when I say champions, you want to get people outside of security saying, yep, man, this is awesome. This is great. Because as soon as you do that, if let's say you get your highest principal engineer on board, everyone else kind of has to follow suit. They have to kind of fall in line, right? And that might be kind of a bad term, but the way that I see it is that that's how you build that trust, right? If your principal engineer is saying, wow, this is great, Ryan and his team are doing great things, this is how we need to build that trust and usability, right? They just want to make their jobs easy. That's all developers want. That's what anyone wants, right? But at the same time, we have to be mindful of the most important thing. How do we make the organization secure at scale to make sure that we build for a public cloud deployment and methodologies? Because that's really all that matters at the end of the day, right? So for example, an IAM deployment in the past was really, really difficult. When I was at a couple companies back, we started on the IAM track and did, IAM users and AWS and access and secret keys. And that was an absolutely dangerous thing. It was terrifying. Now we don't have secrets anywhere. It just works because we have a strategy that builds that trust and transparency, and everything is audited. So any type of access that is there is short-lived. And that only happened because we have that trust, we have the buy-in, and we have that expertise within the organization. And that is completely invaluable. Completely the best thing that I've ever done in my career is being able to find that trust and build the things that I've always wanted to build. And again, these types of tools have really been enabled me to do that, or has enabled me to do that. So again, just want to push that into your brain. Build that trust with developers. Lean on their expertise, right? Don't try to build a Java application and build Terraform on top of it. It's never going to work, right? It's not going to be built right. And it's definitely not going to be, something that's scalable, right? That's their job. But you want to make sure that it's secure and you want to make sure it's built the right way. So again, a lot of times what you can do that we've seen that's been really successful, instead of just saying, okay, you need to use Terraform Cloud because we said so, build a blueprint of why it works, right? So one of the first things that we did is we had a task to build an IAM process and revamp an entirely new thing. Let's just say we had a very bad IAM strategy at the time. Myself really pioneered a IAM strategy, and it wasn't perfect. I'm not going to say it was, but I built that, okay, I can deploy IAM roles and strategies and this process to all of our AWS accounts instantly through Terraform and Terraform Cloud. I proved it worked, right? I proved it worked. As soon as I did that, we got investment, we got champions, we had people trust us because we had that mutual respect, right? I wasn't trying to tell them how to build their application. I was just saying, look, we have to fix this as an organization, as a team, right? And then one of the other things is that don't assign work without context. One thing I've learned over the course of my career so far is context is king. Tribal knowledge is dangerous, right? Our team uses Docs as code. We use open source tools that make our lives easier and transparent. We have to. Because I don't want to assign work to people and just say, you need to use this just because. I want to make sure they understand the context and say, hey, your principal engineer has figured that this works best for you and the entire organization. That is extremely valuable when you get that type of leadership support. Again, have regular cadence with various projects. That kind of goes without saying, but I like to mention it just because, again, if priorities change, if you don't communicate and have that trust and just talk with people, it's really impossible to get things done. And one other thing is have an alignment on an MVP and a post MVP, right? So MVP is most viable or minimum viable product, or post MVP, right? And I've heard this a lot, and there's a part of me that's really against MVPs because that kind of gets things out of the door, right? It gets people money, it gets people out the door. It, it's not my favorite term, but the reason it's important and it's actually very viable in cloud security is because we can use this to our advantage. On the MVP, we can say you need to require this security check, this security check, this security check. And that's what we were able to do. And maybe there's some post MVP stuff, maybe some more difficult to integrate settings or something that maybe takes a lot longer, and that has to be post MVP. Because that can happen after the product is delivered. That is very powerful. That builds that trust, that builds that process and that ability to talk to people that you need, right? Very, very important. And again, how do you build trust with leaders within an organization? Trust, fear, right? Most people fear change. I fear change, right? Everyone fears change. If you say that you don't, I would like to argue that. I would like to find out how, right? I like my cars. I like how things work, right? But I do love technology for its unrelenting change. It's going to change with or without you, right? So if you're thinking about building this kind of process with Terraform and Terraform Cloud, determine a realistic timeline, right? Don't say you're going to do this all in 3 weeks or 4 days or sprint or something, right? Have 6 months, a year to figure out what the results you want them to be. Find a realistic starting point for Terraform. If no one has any idea what it is, go train on it. They have plenty of resources. That's the power of technology in general, is that things are really accessible, especially if you work for a great company. You're going to get the training that you need. Provision the least amount of capacity within Terraform to reduce cost. The great thing about a SaaS product, as a lot of you I'm sure know, you can scale up and down as much as you want. Use that, right? You can actually deploy anything, which is what I did. I deployed everything for free on Terraform Cloud initially, and then we upgraded right after I got funding. That was powerful. It didn't cost them anything. I just had to prove that it worked. And I worked with our developers to make things happen, to show them that it is possible. And that was good enough for everyone. Test and validate alternatives to Terraform, right? This may sound like I'm selling Terraform to all of you. That's not what I'm doing, right? Get your pros and cons. There's no bias to any towards one tool. Validate, be transparent, be consistent in delivery, and make sure that you're building that trust so you don't waste time and things don't suffer in the long run. That's important. So again, just kind of a quick overview. Without Terraform, inconsistent code standards, no oversight, lack of developer transparency, no ability to force change within the pipeline. Automated pipelines, stage gates, standardized modules, integrates easy with CI/CD pipelines such as CircleCI. These are big things. If you've ever worked in development lifecycle, these are absolutely key. Very, very important stuff to know. Again, challenges with Terraform that we've seen. The speed of development out of Terraform, right? It's hard to keep up with modules. If you haven't updated a module in 6 months, it's kind of hard to get your pipeline back in order. I've seen that. Version control, updates and management, onboarding new cloud security engineering is challenging. Security owning infrastructure related to Terraform modules, right? So again, making sure there's that ownership. Who owns what? Who validates what? Who determines what? These are all really key things. How do you overcome? Like I said, set up, maintain regular maintenance tickets, work patterns to ensure proper oversight. Don't assume these things are being done. Be proactive, ask questions. Be transparent, right? I'm not going to read all of this, but be transparent. Don't lie. Don't beat around the bush. Don't try to do something that you're not an expert in. Just don't do that. Make sure that it aligns with what you're trying to accomplish, and be incremental in changes. Don't try to fix it all at once. Just don't try to do that. It does not work. And finally, don't overcomplicate the future, right? Find to improve Terraform. Find out how, because it's all incremental. Everything is incremental. Find the low-hanging fruit, right? Upgrade the lesser findings with risk of exploitation within Terraform code itself. TFSec and other open source tools can help you with that. Don't believe the environments are fully compliant, right? Build that trust, find ways to automate it, and find ways to verify things. You will get pushback. That's what leaders do. What good leaders do, I should say, in a respectful way, right? You want to make sure that you're challenged, but you're not challenged in a way that stops the future, because it's coming whether they want it to or not, especially for cloud security. And it's come in a really quick way for me. And again, what does the future hold, right? Always improve Terraform and assume the worst. That might be negative, but at the same time, you want to make sure that you are trying to make progress and change, not one size fits all. Try not to fix everything at once. Just don't do that. And I want to keep reiterating that because I've been burned so many times trying to do that, right? Just make sure you're showing progress, show that value, show it like you're a developer, and you'll get backing from leadership, right? Try to utilize Sentinel policies, OPA, and other standards to help with stopping of deployments from workspaces within Terraform Cloud. And again, be transparent. Again, I'm going to say that a million times. Be transparent. Make sure that people know the work that you're working on. And any questions? I'll turn it over to Laura. And again, thank you all for allowing me to be here today.
Ryan, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. We do have a number of questions, so I will go ahead and start with the first one. Ryan, not just cloud engineering folks, generally even traditional IT or app developers don't necessarily take security ownership by default. So not clear why cloud engineering is different.
Yeah, great question. So I think for me, app developers and IT in general, you have to take ownership now. The reason I say that is simply because if you don't, who's going to, right? I think the way to think of it as is if you look at who's actually responsible for an organization, it's the CISO, right? The CISO is the one that's going to be legally responsible for everything if something happens, right? And that person will be accountable. I think cloud security engineering is different is because that's the way that we have to adapt, right? App developers and features and all of those things have a very limited kind of set that you have to, fix, right? Like we have backend developers that work on one little tiny thing. And it may be very complicated and you spend hours upon hours improving that one thing. But cloud security, we kind of have to take ownership because, again, as you said, cloud engineering, traditional IT or app developers don't take that ownership. Someone has to. So that's kind of why I want to break the norm of, DevOps and DevSecops. It's not really any of that. It's really cloud security. Cloud security is the ones that those teams are the ones that are really going to engineer how to validate and take ownership of things in a very sensible and easy way. So I hope that answers your question.
Terrific. Next one. This seems to be all about security of dev processes. Is a cloud security engineer role almost entirely focused on DevSecOps, or is a significant portion about securing the rest of the organization, such as applying CIS standards, configuring Sentinel, etc. If cloud security engineer is typically focused on DevSecOps, is there another role that typically focuses on the other areas of cloud security?
Man, these questions are great so far. So I think cloud security it's a buzzword. Let's just be real. Most of things in IT, in cyberspace, is a buzzword, right? But the reason I think it's a little bit different, and the reason that I wanted to focus it, is simply because cloud security engineers, we are really dependent on a CI/CD pipeline, right? Circle CI, GitHub Actions, whatever your flavor, whatever your taste is. But it's everything else. So we do audits, we do Sentinel policies, we do we build new tools and validate new things, and we're basically trying to make everything better. So we have various sprint teams. So we work with developers to deploy new things to the applications, and then we have kind of an operational team where that's kind of where my focus is we fix various vulnerabilities, or we fix defects, or we fix things that are wrong in the environment. So let's say a public bucket is exposed, we would fix that, right? So it's really break fix, it's long-term plays, it's really everything in the cloud. And we can even go as far as shutting off servers that are doing crypto mining or something, right? So we are part of that incident response as well, because we have a SOC that and a DFIR team that reaches out to us and says, hey, what's going on with this one? Can you fix this, right? So we are the ones that, quote, click the button, because we have that access. So it's a very unique place to be, but I think being part of the dev development lifecycle, I guess you could say, is really a key part of our job. So hopefully that answers your question.
Wonderful. When you pre-develop modules for other teams, how do you keep track of constant changes to cloud services like new features, decommission services, etc.?
Yeah, again, another great question. So that is definitely the hardest part. That's kind of the growing pain right now, I guess you could say. So what I have done, that I've undertaken for our team, is we have a maintenance schedule. Just like it sounds, we maintain things, right? And the interesting thing about Terraform is that even if I maintain something, it doesn't mean it's broke, right? If you maintain something, it's probably going down the road like a car, right? If you maintain it, it's probably going to go down the car. This is really no different. So really what we do is, let's say a developer has X, Y, and Z module that we created, and they're like, hey, I'm getting an error. I can't get past this point. Terraform is very smart in that way, that it will say, hey, this line is broken. This one doesn't have a variable or an input or something. So it really allows us to be a developer and say, oh, let me troubleshoot that with you, right? And it's a way for us to kind of have a stage gate without having a stage gate. So if someone's trying to deploy something that's insecure or something that's new, right, that's not been through the dev, non-prod, and production environment in that life cycle, it just won't work, right, without us coming in and helping them get through the process. So that's really how, whether it's a new feature, decommission services, accounts, whatever it is, we will always know, because there is what's called and I didn't go into it, but there is a Terraform workspace that controls how things are deployed to that account. So if you try to deploy to that account without us knowing or having the latest and greatest module from us, it just won't work, right? So hopefully that helps.
Terrific. We still have more questions. Oftentimes I'm faced with security saying no and being a showstopper, which bothers me because I am currently in security. However, I see usability and enabling devs as key element in preventing them from doing things will lead to security being ignored. So my question is, would you deem the approach of usability first while making it as secure and easy as possible to be better and more secure, as compared to, quote, we allow only X, Y, and Z, see what you can do, see what you can make of that, favoring security over usability and getting things done? What's your mindset on this?
Man, you guys could just ask me questions all day, that'd probably work. No, great question. So as much as I love saying no to everything, it's probably one of my favorite parts of the job. However, especially nowadays, when you're not a sysadmin, when you're more of a developer kind of DevSecOps, cloud security mindset, and you're part of that development lifecycle. And again, time is money. Security is an afterthought in terms of how something gets deployed, right? So really my mindset is, okay, is something exposed? Is something misconfigured so badly that a hacker could get on it and literally take the data and go somewhere else, right? So it really just depends on the use case. We use risk to obviously manage those things as well. So what's the risk of allowing X, Y, and Z to happen? That's really what we do from the cloud security engineering perspective. We just won't allow it, right? Until risk is happening. And that's the beauty of Terraform, is that we just say, well, you know, Terraform, you have to update to this version of our module. You have to enable this KMS key or something that encrypts it at rest and in transit, right? So it's more of a, we're not saying no, the technology and our stage gates are saying no. But at the same time, usability will always triumphant over security. That's just an unfortunate fact because, you know, if you can't make money, why have security, right? So, and that's just a thing that just stinks, honestly. But you know, from my perspective, I don't try to say no anymore because it's not like a VPN where, you know, I could just lock someone out, right? People are developing all the time and we have to adjust to that.
Great. Next question. Checkoff is having like 500 plus checks. Do you have any strategy on deciding which of the checks are mandatory to be compliant with?
Gotcha. So I think really that would be a question for compliance. So it depends on what industry you're in. It depends on the frameworks that you have to adhere to. Obviously Cisco is pretty big. I'm sure all of you have heard of them. So we have to comply to all of them pretty much. So it really just depends on your industry and try to prioritize those. And again, if something is just misconfigured so badly and it's publicly exposed, those are the things that you have to fight for. You can't just allow those things to happen because you will be on the front page news. So that's really that's the biggest thing, is use your leaders to fight that battle with you and literally just exploit it, right? We have an offensive security team that exploit those things. And we say, look how bad this is. And that's how you get people to listen.
Wonderful. Have you had any exposure to using OPA for Sentinel policies as well as Azure policy / AWS config? Is it worthwhile?
Yeah, great question. So I did mention that in the slides, I think. So OPA is I forget that, Open Policy Agent, I think is what it stands for. I do have some experience with that with Sentinel. So Sentinel is supported from HashiCorp now officially. So it's great if you have a writer to give you OPA policies. So there is a big tool out there called Wiz that has a lot of pre-built ones for the cloud. I don't like to name drop and endorse tools, but Wiz is definitely one that has enabled some of those things. So I would definitely try to look at them to try to pre-rate those because they are good, but we haven't scaled it out to that level yet.
Okay. Should Terraform security be aligned with the current CI/CD pipeline, or should it be part of a security pipeline?
Oh, good question. So I do not like the term security pipeline, right? So the reason is because it's all one CI/CD pipeline, right? Without security, there is no pipeline. So I would say security is always embedded within that. Whether it's QA, you're checking for, I don't know, if the code isn't the right version or the right packages or something, security is always part of it, and it should never be separate. You should only have different pipelines if you have different products, but security should be built into all of them.
2 more to go. To grow in industry as a cloud security professional, is it necessary to do a master's degree, or certifications alone will give enough of the required kickstart?
Yeah. So as you saw, I have a master's degree, I have a grad certificate, I have, quote, too much education, as some people have told me. But education has never steered me wrong. So, I'm an adjunct professor. That's what I've always wanted to do. Obviously, I want to teach at SANS, but I think it helps me talk to people better. It makes me more well-rounded. It helps you with your CISSP. That's one cert that I've never gotten. I may get it one day, but like for me, those are things that were just more important to me. But you really don't need degrees even for this kind of stuff, right? I've met people with no degrees, and they knew technical code in some cases better than I did. And I've met people with PhDs that are the same way, and vice versa, where they don't know anything. So it really just make the education work for you if you have a goal in mind. For me, it was always I wanted to teach, and master's makes it much easier with the grad certificate from Michigan State. It just makes it easier for me to get to the top of the list. And certifications, I have those too. So just find something you're passionate about is really my biggest advice there.
All right. And the last question. What resources do you recommend with practical information for what can be done in Terraform, like a list from which you can explore and select the ones that could be useful for your organization?
Excuse me. So I'm trying to think. So I think for me, it just depends on what you want to gain out of it, right? So I guess I'd have to know more about your industry, what you're looking for, the size of your organization. But for me, it's just, you have to start small, I guess. Maybe start with like EC2 instances or something, virtual machines, or try to deploy something that makes simple sense. Like let's say I have a Windows box that you need that to have people log into to get something or something like that, where you can deploy that, automate that, validate that, and then you can kind of keep it updated, right? So automatically with Terraform and AWS. So to where you don't have to do anything, right? It's all fully automated. So that might be a use case, but I probably have to know more a little bit on exactly what you mean.
Perfect. Ryan, thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us. And we thank you all for showing up and being with us today. And I put Ryan's contact information in the chat. Feel free to connect with him directly over LinkedIn, Twitch, and email. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, everybody. It was a privilege.